Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. And this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And primarily my focus is on astrology. I find astrology to be a worldview that allows us to take into account many, many different things. It's really a phenomenal area of discovery and learning, and it is old as the time is. It's 5,000 years old or more. And it's my great honor today to have on Stephen Forrest, who is a very highly regarded astrologer. And we're going to be talking about Neptune. I want to remind you all about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, I do a brief overview of the mundane happenings in the planet around the cosmos, and then I break it out into individual signs. I encourage you to sign up for that. My podcasts are on iTunes and many other outlets, and I thank you all for your support in getting this far. Anyway, it's a great honor to have Stephen Forrest on the air today. We're going to be talking about his new book called The Book of Neptune. Stephen, it's great to have you on the air today with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, when I look back at and I find this to be I think we are living in one of the most Neptunian times we could possibly imagine, which I think is probably appropriate given the fact that Neptune is in Pisces, which is the ruler. But I think that when I look back over the current, the current climate that we're in the midst of, with whether that be the political climate or the social climate or what we see across the span of the globe, we see a great deal of the influence of Neptune, I believe. And I think that that is epitomized by the simple fact that when Donald Trump walked out onto the stage of the Republican National Convention, he walked out into a bank of fog. When he came out to make his acceptance speech, he emerged in this bank of fog with the lights. That is total Neptunian. And I'm curious how you envision all that.
Well, certainly the period of Neptune's passage through Pisces, essentially 2011 through 26, for the first beginning and the final end of it, is utterly Neptunian. That's a long, long time. And when a planet is in its own sign, it's extra strong. So, we're in one of those epochs of history that is characterized by strong Neptune. And then this very month, a little earlier in the month, of course, we had Neptune transit over the south node of the moon, which was, in Pisces. And so of this whole decade and a half of Neptune city, that was the moment, just an utterly Neptunian moment. And Neptune, I think of it as the planet of saints and drunks. It's a bit of a tweet, a bit of a bumper sticker.
That's a good one. I like that. Saints and drunks.
I think it is a good one. Yeah,
I do too.
If we take both of those words and sort of take them beyond their literal meaning and let their meaning expand a bit, we actually have some pretty deep theory there. First and foremost, in the kind of astrology I practice, there's no astrological configuration that is inherently good and none that is inherently bad.
I'd agree.
It all depends on how. I'm glad you do. A lot of astrologers will tell fortunes. This will be your lucky year. This will be your unlucky year. And I always say, no, it depends on the choices you make faced with these questions.
Right. We live in a dualistic world, and the dualism is always portrayed through the planets, and each of them have a dualistic quality. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Every front has a back.
That's right. That's very well said.
Get a tattoo. I think Yeah, that would be it. So the back side, so to speak, of Neptune is the drunk, and the bright side, the saint, so to
Hmm.
speak. But again, these are kind of metaphors. They
No, but
encode deeper
they seem
thoughts.
to work. You know, I've always used the analogy along that same line of a criminal and a policeman are very similar people because they sort of walk that line very, it's very sort of representative of the same kind of dichotomy, you know, this sort of this parallel
Exactly.
quality. Yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, really. It goes back to not the most humble man who ever lived in history, thrice majestic Hermes, in
Yeah, yeah,
ancient
as above,
Egypt,
so below,
the
right?
Hermetic law. We're in a universe defined by duality.
Yeah.
You can't talk about up without down or left
Hmm.
without right or on and on, male without female. Each requires the other to have its own identity. Each requires the contrasting background. And in astrology, I might say wise and stupid,
Yeah,
would probably
exactly.
be the
Very,
most
very much
useful
so. Yeah.
concepts. So when a person makes a stupid response or a weak response to Neptune, we would see the drunkenness, we would see delusional kind of behavior, but immediately I would want to add an element of a deeper kind of understanding to it, and that is like if somebody is a drunk or an addict, one way of understanding that is that they're in pain, and they've
Yes.
found a way to address the pain.
Hmm.
It's not a very effective way, and that it creates more pain. But for a while you're drunk or shot up or whatever it is, the pain is gone. When the drug wears off, you can do some more of it.
Yeah, it's sort
Another
of
recommended
representative
path.
of fanaticism in some ways, much the way you might find a religious fanatic who goes one direction or the other. There's that same kind of duality that you mentioned.
Yeah, and but even there, when somebody goes into fanaticism of any sort, it's a short step to think of it as a kind of drunkenness.
Hmm.
Even if
I
they're not
see that
drinking
for
alcohol.
sure. Yeah.
Although fanaticism and alcohol, what a combination!
Yeah.
Stand back,
Yeah. I
But,
know.
but the idea is that the idea that I'm really trying to underscore here is that drunkenness, in the broadest sense of the word, which would include fanaticism, is a response to pain.
Hmm.
Ultimately, it's a response to pain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the key. That gives us the compassionate insight into the dark side of Neptune. Then we think, what is the origin of the pain? Well, Neptune is about sensitivity,
Hmm.
broadly defined. Reduce it to a single word, sensitivity. So here's an easy question for you, for me, and for everybody out there in your land of listeners. Is there pain in the very air of the world today?
Oh,
You
for
just, I
certain.
mean, simplest question.
For certain.
Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah.
The just the I try not to be totally American. I mean, I have people I work with in other countries, and it's so easy to get pulled into just that gravitational center we call America. But in America recently, we've just the sheer discomfort, the sheer rage, the neighbor against neighbor,
Hmm.
regardless of where we are politically. It's one thing everybody left and right has agreed upon is it's been awful,
It has been.
just
Yeah.
awful.
It's brought out the worst
And
of
so,
us.
yeah, exactly. And that hurts. That's
Hmm.
uncomfortable. And so, hence escaping into fanaticism, into alcohol, into whatever, into numbness. How many of my friends over a lot of my friends tend to be more on the Democrat side than the Republican side, and so many of them, it's like I can't stand to look at the news. I just want to numb out now. I can't
Right.
believe this is
We
happening.
sort of want to run
It's
away.
like
We want to run away, which is a very
yeah,
Neptunian quality in itself.
exactly.
Hmm.
And so this is the shadow side of it. So I say Saint and drunk. We roll the word drunk out there, and immediately it's almost impossible not to slip into a kind of judgmental attitude towards the word. And what I'm trying to get at is a compassionate understanding of what motivates people into
Hmm.
that kind of self-destructiveness and craziness.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real tender spot for people because it is so close to the subconscious. It's very close to the sort of the visceral qualities of the personality and the pain that they endure. And the way that they assuage that pain is by going one extreme or the other. And that's where we see that dualistic parallels. You know, it's the delusion and it's the illusion. And we have been, I think all of us in this particular election cycle in especially have been victims of those two qualities in every single possible way we can imagine. We have seen the illusion, we've seen the delusion, we've seen the falsifying of what we thought was real. We thought this was going to be a landslide one direction, it turned out the other. Many qualities have been completely epitomized by this current cycle we're in.
Absolutely. It's like, what is reality?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the ultimate Neptunian questions.
Right. It's really phenomenal.
The guru says to Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was commenting on you. The idea that we see. I think this began later in the probably around June, perhaps even sooner, when we had the Saturn Neptune square, and we saw these two characters waltz onto the stage. One very Saturnian, being Hillary, sort of with the school marm, clean up your room kind of attitude, sort of preaching to us in some regard, and then we have this completely unusual delusional circus character on the other spectrum, not to cast aspersions either way, but these are just who they represent archetypally. And to have them in square, I have to say for myself, I was convinced that Saturn would win. And I'm surprised that we've come to this spot.
Yes, me too. But once again, what is reality? We're all looking at it. All the pollsters, virtually apart from the LA Times, called it for Hillary, and then she's up to 1.6 million votes ahead of Trump now in the actual numerical vote across the country, and so that whole electoral college piece comes in, and that's very complicated. So who won? What is reality? What's going on? Totally Neptunian questions.
I know, and this is one of the things I think that makes astrology so valid and valuable, because it brings to the forefront these characteristics, and they're so clearly delineated, I think, and represented by what we've seen lately. This is classic Neptunian fog that we're under, and it's just remarkable. It's just remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to remember, and comforting as well as important to remember, that historically, whenever Neptune has been in Pisces, a pretty good rule of thumb is that there has been some kind of spiritual awakening on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And that is happening now. Like, it's a vast subject, but just one simple statement. The new Pope, who came in, Francis, pretty much with the arrival of Neptune and Pisces, lined up so closely, and his revitalization of the Roman Catholic Church. It's I don't mean to reduce Neptune and Pisces to a Roman Catholic phenomenon, but his ascension and the impact he's had on that religion illustrates much of the higher ground of the Neptune and Pisces.
Yeah, he's a strong Sagittarius coming in and recasting the church. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. The very month that Neptune entered Pisces, exited, re-entered 2011 and 12, when it finally entered solidly, that very month that it did, I got my copy of Time magazine, and the front cover was, "What if there is no hell?"
Yeah.
The cover of Time magazine, some evangelistic theologian had raised the question, what if God's love is so vast and infinite that he wouldn't leave anybody in hell ever? And I mean, it's a very Piscean question. And of course, predictably, on the more conservative side of religion, oh no, we need hell. We need people in hell. And, people who've masturbated or gotten divorced, or, there's the folks who just love hell, all the Hieronymus Bosch fans, so to speak. But then this totally Piscean idea. And the interesting thing is it's on the cover of Time magazine in perfect synchronization with Neptune going into Pisces. Human attention.
That really is pretty profound. Yeah, it's very profound. The thing of it is that when we think about the construct that you mentioned, the saint or the drunk, they really represent both ends of this sort of wallowing in the unknown. There's this real intangible quality that resonates in there. When we think of a saint, the saint is sort of operating on a level of blind faith, you could argue, because they're just sort of going with what their convictions are very strongly in that realm. And yet the drunk probably feels very much the same when they have their opinions and they state themselves.
Yeah.
These are really very clear delineations of that duality. But the idea that I think people need hell just as a backdrop, much the way we need rainy days. I mean, we can't enjoy the sun unless we have a rainy day, right? Isn't that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, and we certainly have never had a problem creating hell for ourselves. So I don't think I'm too worried about it
No,
getting
there's no
worse. So
shortage of that. No, you're right. You're absolutely right about that.
yeah,
But we have to, temper that with the equal amounts of the goodness that's been done, the progress we have made. I do believe that astrology and evolution in general are a reflection of like a ratchet, I guess is the best way I would think of it. Like where you go, you ratchet two steps forward and you ratchet back one. And we sort of have this ebb and flow of which is similar to the swinging of the pendulum from one end to the other. We kind of need this in order to prompt us back to the other. If we didn't have this
hmm
hardship in our lives, as I always say, if the roof did not leak, we would not fix it. So the roof is leaking, therefore we have to step in and fix it. Correct? I mean, that's part of it.
yeah, absolutely. I think that I know we're focusing on Neptune, but of course, one thing leads to the next in astrology,
Yeah, it
and
sure does.
there's a big Plutonian piece
Mm-hmm.
in this too.
Yeah, there is.
So just very simply, Pluto is always going to bring the shadow side of something up. It enters Scorpio, and the AIDS crisis occurs, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly everybody has to ask hard and uncomfortable questions about sex. It goes into Sagittarius, and all the sexual scandals in the church. The questioning of these holy men, so to speak, with their hands in the till or their hands in the pants, and
Right, right.
it always brings up the shadow. So Capricorn, God bless Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn. Every sign has beautiful qualities, but Capricorn is the conservative sign, and I
Stoic.
don't mean
Yeah.
that in yeah. Well, it's conservative in the healthy sense of the word
Mm-hmm.
conservative. That there are things that are worth conserving. Like we should protect the environment. Sounds like a liberal thing, but we'll talk about a good conservative idea. Save it for the future. So Capricorn, conservative energy. But as soon as Pluto went into Capricorn, 2008, we would expect, like clockwork, that we would start to see the shadow side of conservatism. And right now, right in the middle of Pluto and Capricorn, what's it doing? But
Mm-hmm.
opposing America's sun, the shadow side, the
Mm-hmm.
insane side of conservatism, impacting America very directly. And give me two more sentences. As we get into 2023, we're going to see Pluto going into Aquarius. And I suspect we'll have about 20 years of seeing the shadow side of liberalism. I think you're going to need a carbon emissions certificate to burp. I think we're going to have lots of
Mm-hmm.
regulation. We're going to see the pendulum swinging. The Pluto, you see the dark side of whatever it's touching, whatever needs to be purged, comes up in the mix.
Mm-hmm. It really is
Yeah.
really evident of that. I mean, and I think especially given that in the United States chart in particular, it is coming up to a
Mm-hmm.
Pluto return, which would be a revitalization of all the things. And I've mentioned this in one of my newsletters that when the United States broke from England, I'm sure there were many people living in the United States back in 1776 who were petrified of the fact that we were leaving England. And yet now that history has given us its long cast backwards, we can say, wow, thank God we broke away from England. We are now our own selves. We may, in a sort of an odd way, be witnessing a similar kind of reaction whereby by this stuff coming to the forefront, coming to the light, we therefore have a beacon against which to harbor or to which to form our new path forward. We need the reflective quality of whatever there is out there. If the quality that we're reflecting is negative, that forces us to reflect positively. So in many ways, there is that dualistic quality, again, I've spoken about earlier, that is necessary. It is a prompt for sending the pendulum back the other way.
Yeah, I like this. It's like never trust anyone who thinks they don't have a shadow. Never trust
Right.
anyone who hasn't done their shadow work,
Mm-hmm.
because if they haven't dealt with it, they're going to project it onto you. You
Right.
can count on that. And so the shadow work, it's always correlated with Pluto. And America is invited to do some serious investigation of its shadow now. because of synchronicity. The evidence for that, it's not abstract. We see it in the headlines,
Yeah.
So, racism, etc., sexism, homophobia, really, this will sound strange, but nobody comes out and says, I'm in favor of racism, sexism, homophobia, and environmental destruction. They will often favor policies that look like that. But it's like those are shadow things, and they're part of America. People pretend they're not, but now they're in our face. And so how do we deal with that? Do we act it out, or do we heal? It could go either way.
It could go either way. The better part of me would hope that it goes a way which brings us further forward. I think nothing worth having comes easily. This is evident in the squares in the chart. We see this all the time in astrology, where the tension is. These are moments for which we are evolved. These are moments from which we grow. So growth comes from adversity. I believe that firmly. And I think astrology is very representative of that. And I think that we're entering into that period of time where we can't just go waltzing off into the sunset. We just can't do that. I don't think that's how life is. Life is as a troubled road, and we have to traverse it as best we can. And I think these roadblocks that come our way are evident of that.
Exactly. Waltzing off into the sunset is not even on the table, really, during a Pluto time.
Yeah.
We may try to waltz off into the sunset, but we waltz off into drunkenness or heroin or God knows what, thinking it's the sunset. Yeah.
Right.
So in Pluto, it's like that wonderful line you hear I hear my psychotherapist friends say: you deal with your stuff, or your stuff deals with you.
Yeah.
It's a tweet, but that about nails it. And
you really can't hide. You can't hide. You can't run from it. You can run, but you can't hide. That's what it comes down to. It's always going to be there at some point in your life. And we are. I think that when we cast it this way, in some regard, it gives me a sense of comfort, I have to say. And I don't think this is just naive, Pollyanna-ish trying to make, lemonade out of lemons. I think it really is reality that if we can address this current climate in this kind of context, it allows us to understand it better, and I think to learn from it better.
Yeah, I agree totally. Most of my orientation to astrology is at the individual personal level. That's really what I teach, what I write about, and what I make my living doing with individuals. And something I've learned at that level is that when Pluto comes along, you're ready. I might say barely ready, but you're ready. It's time. You have the power to deal with the issue, to integrate the shadow piece. Whether you will or not depends on choices you make, but the option of getting it right exists. I'm very convinced of that at the personal level. I am sort of tentatively convinced of it at the national level too. I think maybe America is ready to face all of the shadow pieces of its Cancer sun. It is Pluto opposing a Cancer sun, of course. And the shadow side of Cancer, the crab inside the shell. It's really about fear, above everything else. It's about fear. And so our fear of everything on the outside, everything different from normal. I mean, it's like today's headlines. Right?
It is, and of course the crab, retreats from controversy, which would be you consider to be isolationism. We're seeing that kind of thing. We're seeing ourselves backing ourselves into our own little corner, like you can see a crab backing himself into the corner with his claws up. It's all very, representative in that very basic primal action of the crab, sort of, which is a very Cancerian quality, is this backing away and sort of retreat, the sensitive retreat of, I'm gonna hold all my marbles to myself. I'm not letting anybody else have them, and no one else is coming in, and stuff like that. We see those themes resonating and populating up through all the headlines, as you say. It's really true.
That's absolutely true. Take it one step further, though, Chris. What if you're kind of menacing the crab, and it's withdrawing from you, but you back it into a corner? You know what it does next?
Right.
It's got those pinchers, and it becomes aggressive in its defensiveness and its fear.
Yeah, and that's where the problem comes in, because that can be that's where we become more. But I think the United States as a whole has a lot to answer for. We talk about the idea of we I'm going to speak very broadly here. We speak of ourselves as being an altruistic, generous nation, and I do believe at our core we are. But we also have got ourselves into a lot of messes that we shouldn't have been in. And so we do have some debt to pay with regard to writing that, I think, don't you?
Yes, yeah, I would feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the candidate I would vote for. Yeah,
it's sort of we've created a lot of mess. We've put ourselves into a lot of situations we probably shouldn't have. We've exercised our rhetoric out of greed, out of power, out of dominance, out of superiority. All of those things were very much American, and yet America is unique in the world because of the simple fact that we are probably the truest social experiment of all, because we are this melting pot. So it's almost like if you can't do it here, where can you do it? It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
And it's probably harder here, just to give America some credit for the very reason you just said, that because we are such a melting pot, because we are such a diverse society, humans have always tended to divide up into smaller ethnic groups, and we have the same color hair or the same color eyes or same color skin, and here in America we for 200 years or so we've been realizing we have to define ourselves differently, a common set of values rather than a common genetic code. Sometimes we've done pretty well with it, sometimes not.
And yet, I think that in the what's the word I want, into the intermingling of the races, we will find the end of racism, because we will all be similar. As we become more and more integrated with each other, and we become, our skin becomes all the same in some regard, there will be no longer, this is a long way off obviously, but there is no longer this immediately identifiable outer skin that's going to be different, because eventually, as time progresses, 300-400 years from now, we'll all be looking very similar, I suspect.
Yeah, it might not even take that long.
Yeah, it might not. You're absolutely right. It's really really something to think about it, because through that, it's kind of like, when you're mixing ingredients. If you mix chocolate syrup and vanilla ice cream and you mix them together, eventually you come out with something that looks a little brown. It's a little tannish, and you get that whole thing gets mixed together and like a milkshake. And I think it's through that. Idea of the transfiguration of these qualities that we see that pureness coming to, and that's when racism will eventually be gone, right? And that's really the secret, is that it's all gone at that point in time. We're going to take a quick break here. We're talking today with Stephen Forrest. He's a wonderful astrologer. His website is forrestastrology.com. That's Forrest with 2 R's. forrestastrology.com. I encourage you to check out his website. He has got a virtual wealth of information on there, books that are fantastically erudite and wonderfully astounding as far as their wisdom and knowledge. And it really, I think, puts astrology in the proper context. We'll be right back. We're going to continue our conversation, so hang in there, and we'll be right back. So, what is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today. Or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com. Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color. Okay. All right, we're back today on Turning the Wheel with Stephen Forrest. His website is forrestastrology.com. It's Forrest with 2 R's. And we're talking today about Neptune because Neptune has been such a predominant player in our local current political climate, I think is the best way to see it. We really see all of these elements of astrology coming to light in the most fantastic. I mean, this is why I love astrology, and I'm sure it just makes you shake your head as well, because we see the accuracy of there, and we see these. I mean, when I saw Donald Trump walk out onto the stage at the Republican National Convention in that bank of fog, I said, my gosh, this is Neptune at its purest. This is just pure Neptunian. Not only that, but he's delusional in his own regard, and that's not to cast aspersions on him or his political party. It's just that to have this sense of your own inner self and the way he sees himself is remarkably Neptunian. It's just phenomenal, don't you think? I mean, and I'm curious, when you look at this from another standpoint, as a personal person, because you say you deal with Neptune on the personal level, how do you see this manifesting in say, Donald Trump's own chart or his rise to the top?
I'm really not prepared to answer that one, to tell you the truth, Chris. I tend to, when I'm doing astrology for individuals, which is the whole heart of my life, I need to be in a loving, affirmative,
right. Yeah, I get that.
Spiritual place to do it. And I find it difficult to look at the chart of Donald Trump with that kind of pure heart. And
I think that's fair. That's good.
I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but it really, I'm getting emails all the time. Look at his chart. When is he going to fall, or is he going to succeed? And, I don't have the consciousness to look at him with that kind of clarity. I can rather comfortably talk about America and how he fits into.
No, I think that's very honest and it's full of candor, and I appreciate that. That is a wonderful spot. And I actually don't know much about him myself, other than I know his chart and stuff like that. And I think that your approach is a very loving and kind approach to him. But I think that the current dynamics that we're seeing of Neptune as a archetype in the chart of the United States coming to fruition now is spot on.
Yeah, it feels like it. What a time! And on my website right now, and thank you for mentioning it. I do a monthly newsletter, and the November one that's still up there at this point. I had to write it in October, obviously. I had to have it in advance, and I knew it would be such a pivotal month. The election. I didn't know how the election was going to come out. I never knew whether to believe the polls or not. It was looking like Hillary, but nobody's totally sure. So I wrote a newsletter. It wasn't really directly about the election at all. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. It was, the title of it was When the Saints Come Marching In. And the idea was that with the south node of the moon in Pisces with Neptune on it, it is the most Neptunian moment of the most Neptunian Neptunian part of the whole 165-year Neptune cycle. You know? And so the south node of the moon is going to have to do with the karma of anybody born then.
Yeah.
And so in this newsletter, I make the point that this month, November 2016, whatever is going on in the world, something that is vastly more important is the birth of saints. Kids who are born this month, many of them will carry a lofty, extraordinary level of consciousness. Is a new Messiah born? Could be. Are there master teachers born? I'd stake my life on it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there drunks and delusionals? You know, the dark side of Neptune? Sure.
Yeah.
But among them, you know, it's like the saints appear, the gurus, the masters, call them whatever you want. They come in the darkest hour. They come at the time that we need them. And in that letter that I wrote in October, I just asked the question in anticipation of this month, is this the darkest hour? Does this feel like the darkest hour? And of course, for many of us, at least on the more progressive side of the equation, you know, there's this what just happened. It does seem like the triumph of hatred and racism, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are other people with different points of view, but we sure could use some saints. And I have a feeling they're appearing now. Now,
Yeah.
Of course, they're like flowers that won't open for 20 years, 30 years. It's the nature of a human birth. But meanwhile, each one of us has something of a new consciousness being born within us. You know, and so that's the kind of transiting meaning of this thing, that there's tremendous pulse of essentially mystical, spiritual energy. I mean, compassion, I mean, understanding and wisdom. A pulse of that is coming now in the darkness. When we need it.
That is the antidote.
Hope.
That's the antidote. You're right. And I think that is very appropriate to be feeling that now. And that would be the precipitating moment for that would be the entering into darkness. And things could get much darker as they have historically. We've known that. We've seen situations where things have gotten very dark in the history of the planet. And they are parallels. There certainly are. I mean, we can look at this as a time, you know, even if we look at the Uranus transits, for example, speaking of another planet, going back to 1932, we would see the rise of, you know, a very sort of a fascist kind of a figure, which obviously got us to where we are today. We are talking today on the anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which was a major defining moment in the history of the United States. And we see these parallels happening with regard to, you know, the forward motion. But I do think that these things, as you say, they require. The saints do seem to appear at these moments when the view is the darkest, as it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just when we need them. You know, come. It's the need that summons them.
It is the need that summons them. Yes, I think that's right. And you know, when we look back, I mean, over our lifetimes, we've seen quite a span of history over the course of our lives. I was born in 1952, so I lived through, you know, this Kennedy assassination. We lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. We lived through the Vietnam War. We see all these major political movements that have come, and yet we know that historically that astrology is a recurring cycle. It's a cyclical kind of construct that brings us back to a place in time where the theme recurs. Maybe not the same. Obviously, we're down the road further because time is a Helios. It turns like a corkscrew, but we're down the road further, and we know that that's happening, and we can see ourselves in that situation now.
Yes, exactly. The archetypes.
The archetypes, exactly.
Yeah, and our response to them is where the wild cards come in, thank God, because that's where human freedom and human consciousness lies. You know, that we can rise to these things and do terrific things, and sometimes we do.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, the Uranus quality is, you know, it's brought us the internet, it's brought us this cellular world we live in, it's brought us this Facebook, it's brought us all this stuff that we live on nowadays. Very Uranian and of course very pioneering, being in Aries is logical. But we see these events and we have to be able to look at them, I think, with a longer lens of history. And I think that's where astrology really plays out well. And I know this is a wonderful talent that you have and a wonderful way of presenting it is your ability to take these longer views and to see the slow arc of time. And in some ways, I think that that is comforting. I mean, I personally find it comforting to know that, yes, we are going through this because, yes, we are supposed to go through this.
Yes, yeah, I think so too. I find it comforting as well. Just thinking, of talking a few minutes ago about Pluto and Capricorn. So,
Mm-hmm.
time to purge the shadow side of conservatism. Not that liberalism doesn't have a shadow side, but its turn will come for that purging when Neptune goes into Aquarius, I suspect. And
Mm-hmm.
so that, we can almost any philosophical human can sense that the pendulum swings, but where astrologers have a leg up is we can say when it's going to swing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a great comfort.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, it sort of prepares you. It prepares you for what's about to occur. It gets you in line with that, and I think we find it to be pretty apparent that that is where we're going to be at our time and place. And when we see that on the horizon, we can take comfort in that because we know that yes, this is supposed to happen. Just like we know it's going to rain tomorrow or it's not going to rain tomorrow. We have that sense of forecasting there. When you look at it, when you look at Neptune on a personal level, to the individual, I love that your comment about the saints and the drunks. I mean, that is just nails it perfectly because it really is those two extremes. We think of them as extremes, and that really is what, because of course Neptune is the land of delusion, it's the land of addiction, it's the realm of all of those elusive, fog-bound characteristics. I always think of the old Alfred Hitchcock films with the fog coming off the river and the dark lights and the black and white films, and to me that's totally Neptunian. And
and what's that moving out there in the darkness?
yeah, exactly. That is the realm of Neptune, and yet we have this other redemptive quality of Neptune. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about that, because you've written this. One of the great books that you've written is called The Book of Neptune, which has just been released about what you said about a year ago, roughly.
Yeah, just about, not quite.
Yeah, and in that book you go into great detail about the role of Neptune in the individual as well as an archetypal. And I'm curious as to what you think of. Primarily more of some of the more optimistic aspects of Neptune. Or how would you describe that if you had to sort of do the elevator speech on Neptune?
Yeah, for sure. I guess in the elevator speech, I'd start off with, it's planet of saints and drunks, and then try to draw the connection between them. And I was touching on this earlier. Why does somebody become a drunk? Well, they're sensitive and they're hurting, and they found a way to numb themselves, and so they go down that road. But what if we use the sensitivity more consciously? What if we find another way to live with this heightened sensitivity? What might that look like? And immediately this begins to open up the higher Neptune as we begin to work with sensitivity without numbing it. We might invoke, for one illustration, the idea of meditation. Like the meditation practice is a strong, positive, affirmative response to a Neptunian period in a person's life. You sit with that. I'm totally comfortable saying that. But the edge is, somebody might imagine that the next thing I'm going to do is start handing them Jehovah's Witness literature,
right?
Or Hare Krishna literature. Like I'm going to have a partisan religious position. So when I put the word meditation on the table as a positive Neptune statement, I like to immediately let it breathe as much as possible. Like one of my favorite illustrations is to speak of an artist, for example, a poet, let's say, who's gazing out the window and then runs back to the desk and finishes the poem. So where did that line come from? The poet is in a trance state, a mystical state, might not believe in God, might not use spiritual language, but the poet has entered the creative trance. And that's a strong Neptunian response. Trance work.
Which really plays into the Venus.
I
think it plays very well into the Pisces quality, because that's really the realm of the artist. That's the realm of the spiritual leader. That's the realm of the priest. That's the realm of the great thought, the great philosophers. That is that whole realm. And then we look at this historically, bringing it back, as you say, 165 years to a time in the past when this was present. We would come into a time when existentialism and transcendentalism were highlighted, and the whole theosophists became into relevance, and there was this whole birth of the spiritual quality in response probably to what was happening in the world at the time.
We had seances in the White House.
Yes, we did.
Literally, Abraham Lincoln, Neptune and Pisces, working with the spiritualist church. I've learned the most interesting thing. In 1850, Neptune's and Pisces in America, estimated population of the United States, about 23 million people. 11 million of them, almost half, reported membership in a spiritualist church.
Wow,
and this
that's
is like
remarkable.
Communion with the dead and so on. As a religious movement, you don't learn that in your history books. It seems a little too weird. Abraham Lincoln communicating, with dead relatives, and in the White House, they don't like to talk about that, but it was reality. It's fascinating.
Yeah, which I think really plays into the idea. It really illustrates the cyclical nature of Neptune, because here we are back again in that situation where this will all come to fruition, and we have seen it. I have seen it as an astrologer. I see the renewed interest in astrology. I see a people grasping for something deeper, but I also see them retreating from conventional, traditional religious forms such as the church. I mean, the church membership is way down. People are looking for alternatives. This is very predominant. So this really is this recurring of that theme once again.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
There's many people you can talk to today, if they have any openness to spirituality, I'm just going to run an idea up the flagpole and then think about it. The idea that somebody calls God God, and somebody calls God Allah, and somebody calls God Brahma or Vishnu, and aren't they all different words for the same thing?
Yeah.
As I say that, in many circles, you get a polite nod of the head, like I'm kind of stating the obvious, and I think maybe I am, and yet this idea is still controversial in some circles. And 100 years ago, you could be, maybe burned at the stake, or 300 years ago,
Right, yeah, that's true.
for saying such a thing. So I think this is part of the current cycle of Neptune and Pisces, the realization that there is a kind of universal reality to human spirituality, and it can manifest in the diversity of religions, but the spiritual experience itself is the point, and a Muslim at prayer, and a Christian at prayer, and a Buddhist at prayer, are really not so different from each other.
No, they're very much the same, because they all spring from the same root. But how do we accommodate, or how do we rationalize the disparity in those sects? Because we have, obviously there's this whole, the idea of radical Islam, for example. There's the whole idea of, whatever's going on with it, and religion becomes part of the topic. When religion becomes part of the topic, how do we address that through this discourse? How do we rationalize that? I mean, is it just that people have their own individualized views and they're not willing to reach beyond that? Or why is this fear so present, do you think?
It's a big question. I'm going to let my elevator speech response to it be written by somebody else. And that's a wonderful murder mystery writer of all people by the name of Jonathan Kellerman. He's always on the bestseller list. So
Okay.
I'm a big fan of him. And I was reading one of his books, and he had one sentence that just blew my mind with its accuracy. The fairest and deepest statement I've ever heard about religion. And here it was, Jonathan Kellerman. Religion makes good people better and bad people worse.
Yeah, that's true. It does.
Isn't that a goosebumper?
It really is. It sort of brings out the worst and the best.
It really works, but then there's that dark side to it.
Yeah, and that's
Fanatics are saints.
That's the dichotomy we were talking about earlier. The sort of the dualistic quality of life, of humanity, and the fact that we are always immersed in this swirl of dialogue. It's almost like it's like positive and negative energy. You can't have one without the other, and the two needed each other to survive in order to keep the great Earth spinning. So that's just a variant of that, if you think of it. It's the same idea, just a variation on that theme, it manifested in a different way. And I think that speaks to the idea of what it can do and the potential that's there. And I think that for us to think that things are going to be different, perhaps, is outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, if that's too strong, then I'm fine with that. But I don't think we have. I think this is just how it is. If we keep thinking that we're going to go marching off into this down the yellow brick road to the land of Oz, and hopefully we're going to get there someday, I'm not quite sure that that's. I think that we're seeing that is not as easy as we think. I think it's nice as a concept, but I don't think that's the way life works. I think it's always fraught with this dark side. Do you?
I'm with you on that, Chris, and it's a delicate area. There's a belief that I encounter, and you probably do a lot, is that humans are progressing and evolving into a higher state. But in my metaphysical, my spiritual life, my sense of it, it starts off with the idea that Earth is really just one place where consciousness can have experience. It's not the most prestigious address in the galaxy, for starters. There are other planes of existence and so on. And Earth is like a school where souls come into the human body and they wrestle with the realities of appetite, of ego, of power, and things like that. And just like we don't hope that our local high school can evolve into a university,
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, maybe we shouldn't hope that the Earth evolves into a university, so to speak.
Yeah.
Earth is a place where souls come to learn certain lessons. When they're done, they move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's probably the best. Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I think that does sort of that makes a lot of sense because we only learn, again, getting back to the idea of growth through adversity is really the only way we really do. We don't. If everything was easy, we'd just sit back and coast, and we just can't do that. We've seen that all through history. It doesn't exist. It's really, and I guess that this is probably an age-old philosophical question, but it certainly does seem to hold water, doesn't it? I mean, I'm sure people have wrestled with this forever, but it's there, and it doesn't seem to go away.
Yes, exactly.
That's not to say that we don't make progress. We do make progress, right?
Well, yeah, it's in some ways, yes, but in terms of progress, I think the ultimate barometer of spiritual evolution is probably kindness.
Mm-hmm.
That, if we can observe kindness, we probably have a more evolved being. And has kindness grown on the earth? I don't know the answer. In my lifetime, it almost seems like it's gone the other direction, that there's more cruelty.
Yeah, I know, and that is
a kid, but I'm not even sure that's true. What I feel pretty confident saying is that there has not been a marked change in terms of the level of kindness on the earth.
Well, we see pockets of it. There are people who are exemplars of that. We have our Mother Teresas, we have our Gandhis, we have our Martin Luther Kings. We have all these great people who hold the standard very high for our evolution, and they are right for the time, but we often find them being cut down, as we see, and that's sort of the antithesis of what we want. And then out of that comes this other. So it really is this pendulum swing, and I think that Neptune, I guess, brings that more to light perhaps than others because we don't ever really see clearly in that regard. We don't really ever have that. So, I mean, do you think that we are seeing clearly now? Do you think that we are seeing clearly? Is this reality? I mean, it is. It's on the page of the newspaper, but are we really where we are?
I think behind the headlines, there is a spiritual awakening happening on the planet. But when I say that, I want to be very careful. Some of the terminal New Age people, if you get my drift,
right.
Imagine I'm immediately going to go to the dawn of a golden age of peace, love, and understanding. Well, we've not seen one of those. But the arrival of Neptune in Pisces on that 165-year schedule has reliably coincided with the turning of collective attention to spiritual matters. And so I love to throw out an image of a neo-Nazi skinhead, driving down the road, and he punches the radio down to get some, violent rap music or something or other, and he hits the wrong button, and it's Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And for 30 seconds, this neo-Nazi skinhead is just transfixed by Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. 30 seconds, and then back to bang, 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 but for 30 seconds in a state, a violent drug dealer on the U.S.-Mexican border kills people and all that, gazing up for 20 seconds into the Milky Way, just feeling that transcendence. And it's these kinds of moments. I'm using examples of hard, violent people, but everybody has a soul, and the soul is charged with these Neptunian energies. We're all going to meditate 5% more, in the Neptune and Pisces time than we did in Neptune and Aquarius. Obviously, I'm making up a number, but the point that I'm making is it's incremental, but the increment is significant, and it comes together and produces a reawakening, perhaps a new religion, a renaissance. It's worked in the past, and it's, I think, working now.
Yeah, I think Renaissance is a good way of looking at it. I think that's the way we would have to think of it, because you would only get to where, if we did not have, as I mentioned earlier, if the roof did not leak, we would not fix it. So the pendulum swings a certain way, it hits a certain spot, people get agitated, they're upset, they're angry because things didn't go the way they wanted it to go. But that is the motivator. That's the great motivator, is that sense of that reawakening, that deepening. And I think your comment and your observation about the guy driving in the car and hitting the radio button is exactly what it's all about. Those little gems, those little pearls of time that bring us to those moments of recognition are really where it's at. And that's what we have to draw from.
Multiply it by 7 billion people on the planet, and it's a force.
Yeah. It's really remarkable.
I find that encouraging. Neptune is always subtle. It's always behind the scenes.
Yeah, it is. It's very subtle, and it's a very complicated area. And yet when you look at it, when you see it in the individual, where do you think it's most prominent? Do you ever have a thought on that? Or where is it the most effective? Where it's the most effective in the individual?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, we just get into some kind of basic technical astrology that a Neptune conjunct the Sun or conjunct the ascendant, for example, conjunct the moon, is going to be more central for that person.
Yeah.
And so the stakes, the Neptunian stakes are higher. If I see that kind of configuration in a person, I'll probably go ahead and use the line, you'll be a saint or you'll be a drunk, and then, expand on both of them and encourage them in the general direction of sainthood. And where it gets interesting is that, another place where it gets interesting is each Neptunian configuration will also suggest a specific path of maximal efficiency. Think for just simply, fifth house technically has to do with creativity. Yeah. Earlier I talked about the poet gazing out the window and receiving the inspiration for the poem. That could be Neptune in the fifth house, where creativity is the optimally efficient, effective spiritual path for you. Whereas Neptune in the sixth house of servants, a path of service. It's also a house that could refer to the idea of surrendering to a master teacher. Should I have a guru or not? Some people can benefit, some people maybe not. Neptune in the sixth house suggests you're ready to receive that kind of instruction. Very different from Neptune in the fifth house. And we could sort of go on and on. This is the whole book of Neptunism.
Yeah, it's the book.
All the different configurations that describe the optimally efficient path.
And it's worthwhile for people to understand this, and I encourage you all listening to check out Stephen's book, The Book of Neptune. It's on his website, forrestastrology.com. It's Forrest with 2 R's. I think it's important to be able to identify that in yourself, because we can have the power to, we may not be able to choose when we're born or what our birth charts look like, but we do have the ability to redirect the energy in a direction. So we may be stuck with a difficult Neptune in our charts, but we also have the ability to point that in a positive direction. I think that's probably what would be the benefit of it. I think that's true for all astrology charts and all people's all of the weird aspects they may have in their charts, of those lives that they think are hard. Any situation, how difficult it may be, can be rectified and redirected in a positive way.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where
that's the whole purpose of having that chart.
Yeah, that's right. That's where you get the saint and the drunk in the same room together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And there are no bad charts. There are no bad charts.
That's true.
The chart is perfect.
It's
You
true,
can
and you
always count on
can't
that,
and you
know?
can't bemoan the chart that you have, because in there is attributes and liabilities, but the liabilities are there to force you to grow. The assets are the gifts that you get when you're born, and that's about as best as it gets.
There
So
you go.
anyway, it's been great talking to you today, Stephen. I appreciate you very much taking the time for your busy schedule. I encourage you all to go to Stephen's website. It's called Forrest Astrology. It's Forrest with 2 R's, forrestastrology.com. He's got a fabulous new book there called The Book of Neptune, and he's also re-releasing a book called The Night Speaks. All of his books take this very long, philosophical, very deep thought kind of approach to life, living, and how we get through it all. And I think it's comforting in many ways to know that much of what happens to us is supposed to happen, and it's how we respond to it that is the distinction. We can respond to it in a positive way, or we can let it bring us down. The secret is to try to rise from the ashes as best we can and glean what we can from this knowledge in ways that help us evolve and grow and be better people, ultimately. So I thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate it very much. Once again, Stephen Forrest, a remarkably phenomenal astrologer, very well known, got many, many books out there. I encourage you to go to forrestastrology.com. That's Forrest with 2 R's. Stephen Forrest has been my guest today. We've been talking about Neptune, and it sort of gives us I think it's a soothing salve on what has just occurred. So, thank you, Stephen, so much for talking with me today, and
You're welcome.
I appreciate it very much. Yeah, it's always great to talk to you. Hope to see you at one of the conferences near soon.
Good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.